Hi, everybody. Welcome to AI TV. My name is Nick Bradshaw. I'm the host of the channel. We're the sister channel to AI Expo Africa, which is exploring everything to do with AI, the fourth industrial revolution, and all relevant technologies that's going on across the continent. Every now and then we interview thought leaders, not only locally and continentally, but also elsewhere around the world. And it gives me great pleasure today to welcome Tolani Jaiye-Tikolo, who is the RPA Jargon Buster. Welcome, Tolani, to AI TV. How are you doing?
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm doing well. It's a sunny island today, so I'm just based out of Dublin, so it's not too bad. It's summer. I'm really happy to be here and have one or two discussions with you.
Thanks, Tolani. I came across you on LinkedIn. You're a prolific sharer of content and knowledge, and that's exactly exactly what we want to share on our channel. And I came across you as the RPA Jargon Buster. And for many of our viewers who might be new to the topic, let's just explore the definitions of RPA and a little bit more about the work that you do. Do you want to explain that a little bit more?
Good. RPA, robotic process automation, is basically software robot that automates business processes to increase productivity, increase agility within the enterprise. And it's been around, I'll probably say it's been around for maybe 10 years. It's evolved from other corresponding technologies, practically from the development perspective, but it's evolved into a market space where we're beginning to think that they can actually automate and do more with automation. Then just giving you a bit of concept or more into my angle of where I'm coming from as the RPA Jargon Buster. I'll give you an example. I'll give you a story before I talk about the example. Years ago, I think just before LinkedIn, before I really started being active on LinkedIn, I used to write a lot on Quora. And during that time, it was before we had all these RPA tools. I was actually using Blue Prism as of that time. And I used to answer a lot of questions, and people would ask, what was the future of automation? What was RPA? Were different things about RPA? So I used to spend a lot of time doing that from 2016 to 2017. I still write, but not very much. And I thought to myself, you're really busting the myths and busting the jargons around RPA. Why don't you coin that name? And people tend to remember with funny names and all that. So I coined that name for myself, and I remember changing my LinkedIn name to Tolani, then in bracket RPA Jargon Buster, and my last name. And a lot of people were like, what's this person? Because every time I comment on someone else's post, they saw the RPA Jargon Buster. And RPA Jargon Buster has evolved into something else. As of 2021, it became an actual business. It's a small business based out of Ireland. And we do 4 things quite well, all things intelligent automation, research, advisory, consulting, and also corporate trainings. But we are at a small scale. We're practically like a small business. SME, SMB, as you may want to call us. But it's been really interesting, being in this sort of business, change people's mindset about automation and spreading the word of automation, globally.
Yeah, it's fantastic how some personal branding and the use of LinkedIn, led into, your business. I mean, that in itself is a great case study for some of the younger wannabe entrepreneurs who want to get involved in this. And I'm a big advocate of LinkedIn and using it as a platform. So that's great. Now, I guess maybe there might be some confusion around, RPA versus intelligent automation. How would you kind of separate those two, and where are they heading into the future?
I think I give an example here. Every time we talked about RPA, because RPA was automating repetitive, mundane tasks, it would basically be what a human can do with business rules. It's all rule-based, meaning you had to tell, RPA, if Y it exists, do X. If there's a business user, or if there is a scenario, do this. The thing about RPA is it was practically the ants of automation. It did all the, the repetitive task, but there was no thinking associated with RPA. For example, RPA could be very intuitive if there was a scenario where it was it wasn't a scenario that occurred, very much, or it was, there were some very odd scenarios. So, but the thing is, RPA was very good for all this task, but it lacked the brain. And that's where intelligent automation came into the picture. Intelligent automation is the application of AI and RPA. AI powering RPA has been the brain of automation, and RPA actually doing the work regarding automation. And that's how, intelligent automation has become mainstream since 2017.
And I mean, obviously, I've come across people in the enterprise. I mean, AI TV and AI Expo, we're focusing on mainly the business user here in Africa. And obviously, we've seen massive adoption with the banks, the insurance companies, the telcos. Typically, also organizations have call centers where they're trying to automate, as you say, the mundane processes that happen traditionally in the back office, perhaps. But I mean, clearly things have evolved, and I've seen it evolve in the last 5 years. I mean, where are the big sort of top 3 or 4 trends now? Where is this all heading?
One thing about intelligent automation as a space is it's debunking a lot of myths around automation. I'll put it out there first, and I'll tell you why I said that. One is, if you're quite aware of the global climate actions at the moment, you're talking about Russia, you're talking about border controls, you're talking about COVID. We're still recovering from COVID, and even if you look at the Great Resignation, automation has really bridged that gap. A lot of companies are beginning to deploy automation as a way to deal with all this global event. And this is where automation is really playing a major role, not just within Europe itself, but globally. We are seeing that there's a stat that's out there. There's a stat that talks about 61% of businesses are using automation to address staffing shortages. And this is coming from Automation Anywhere, a vendor that's talking about how automation is working in that context. We are also seeing that also a large percentage, 94%, that's using automation to address supply chain movement. And this is something that's really interesting. I know the way people are beginning to deploy automation. Prior to how automation was deployed in the last 4 or 5 years, people were looking at it to tackle very simple processes, Excel-based processes, but people are really looking at it at the global landscape. We're looking at it to address major issues. That's one thing. And the second thing we are actually seeing is there's an underserved market where automation has never been leveraged to this extent. And that underserved market is typically your enterprises, your mid-market businesses, and automation is doing a lot there. I'll give you an example. I had last year, I think it was last year, during the onset of COVID, we had a client who was just based out of the US, and they were a non-profit healthcare. So non-profit, you wouldn't assume that they would need automation for anything, but during COVID, the COVID-19 pandemic, they had their patient registration was skyrocketing. People were registering to get not just the boosters, people were registering to just become a patient in their clinic at that point. And they were looking at automation to actually scale up and scale down, because at this point they were using a lot of contingent workers, which was a lot on their resources. And you were using RPA at that point to really do very amazing things, build up all these bandwidth within the team, and they were able to actually scale that, do as much as they would have done in 1 or 2 weeks in 2 days, which is remarkable when people think about, how automation is helping these underserved markets. And there are other examples of how, RPA and intelligent automation is actually changing the landscape. We're even beginning to see a new trend called citizen development, where in large enterprises, they practically want to operate as SMEs, which is quite funny. You have, one person, Anna from marketing, that wants to be able to automate some things. You have different Sean from HR that's beginning to think about automation in terms of, using Excel, creating reports. All of these things is happening within this landscape. We're beginning to even see, in Europe, we're beginning to see some new jobs emerge called RPA, citizen developer. All they do is They build reports, they do the mundane task by themselves within the team. So people are beginning to get more involved in automation. They want to be empowered with digital tools. They want to be part of, the way automation is evolving, which is a very interesting space to look at when you think about automation. And lastly, I'll just end it on this note, digital transformation can be enabled by intelligent automation. People are saying it now that if there's no strategy for automation, they're going to run into problems. If there is no strategy for how companies can actually do more with less, there's going to be a problem. So these are all the trends that are happening all at the same time. You can call it a double whammy at this point. They're happening all at the same time. And people need to really take charge on destiny and be part of these trends.
So, I mean, clearly in the African continent, and obviously I'm based in South Africa, you've got varying degrees of unemployment, and yet we've seen the emergence of many free open source training programs. There's a lot of educational resources available to people to embark on a completely new journey, which maybe they thought was something they could never do themselves. And you talk about citizen development, the rise of the RPA citizen developer. What would be your advice for a young a student maybe who's thinking, right, I want to get into this discipline? What advice would you give to someone who wants to start a journey in looking at process automation and making a career out of that, maybe as an individual initially, or maybe joining a company? What would you recommend?
For a student, it depends on their career, the career pathways they obviously want to get involved in. A lot of students might come into the automation era wanting to become a developer. Some might want to become a project manager, depending on the case. And especially in South Africa at the moment, there's some of the automation vendors that are really, working on that market. You have the likes of Blue Prism, you have the likes of Automation Anywhere, and they're really doing a lot of partnerships, with the locals at the moment. There's one of the partnerships, a good friend of mine, Tolani Jaiye-Tikolo. I think you've interviewed her in the past. She's a good friend of mine, and I know she owns the RPA Nuggets, that she does a bit of training there.
That's right, yeah.
Yes, so she's doing a little bit of empowerment for women at this point. And I know she has a mandate for herself to actually empower, I think about in 2025, 1 million women. So I would advise people to get really in touch with some of all these things that are happening at the local level. But if you're thinking about that on the global level, there are different other opportunities. Some of the free educations that are out there from some of these vendors. You have the Blue Prism University, you have Automation Anywhere. There's so many of these courses they have online, and this really opens up your eyes to see some of the opportunities out there. And also judging by also I want to mention something else as well. And I think COVID-19 did something remarkable for us. COVID-19 made talent mobility a big thing.
Exactly.
People are very mobile. I have a friend based out of Australia at the moment. He has a marketplace similar to Fiverr, but all he does is exchange, digital exchange. Is called Automator. So he connects people from South Africa, Nigeria, and other places with international companies that are looking for talent to actually develop some bot for them. And what he has done is he actually was on my podcast a while ago, and he has a company just based out of Australia actually hiring a Nigerian developer, for example, which is quite funny. Amazing. And he had all of this happening at the same time, and everything was really enabled by digital tools. People really need to be physically there to actually do the work.
No, you don't need a visa.
You don't even need visa. So COVID-19 opened our eyes to remote working in that context. And these are some of the examples that people in Africa can really leverage. And there are also some local communities that are happening at the moment. We're having some of the Blue Prism communities, some of the UiPath communities, and just getting involved with that community gives us a sense of belonging, trying to understand what's really going on within that landscape. But again, there's always going to be a lot of disparities, for example, just in terms of how people might grow differently in different countries. I'm Nigerian originally, so I can understand, the struggles of, being a Nigerian, trying to get access to some of this based on the resources you have. And these are different things that would work in that dynamic, right? I would always suggest, get involved, join communities, find mentors. I mentor a few people as well, but find mentors that can really help you in their career.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic advice. I mean, I'm a big advocate of just turn up, show up, get involved, get stuck in. No one's going to trip you over. You don't have to be, you can start from zero knowledge. You don't have to be a hardcore coder for 10 years. And I echo your advice as well. There are local communities, as you mentioned, RPA Nuggets here in Southern Africa with a global ambition across the continent. We have Blue Prism coming to our event, and I know Blue Prism and the like of automation areas. They have their universities and their skills programs. People, if you've got an internet connection, or you can get to a library, get on a computer, log on, have a look at these resources, and just sign up and get stuck in, and then look at meetup platforms. Turn up at a meeting in an evening, or they're typically 4:30, 5 o'clock. And just turn up, and most of these people are welcoming newcomers. There's no embarrassment if you don't know anything, and there's always someone to help. So I totally echo that. I mean, Tolani, just to wrap up, I mean, if you are embarking as a SME, and as you say, small, medium-sized companies now are starting to look at this, what would you say are the top 3 factors for success in deploying RPA and process automation technologies in an SME environment?
I think the first thing is know your process. I can't overemphasize how important that is. Know your process, then think about the art of possible. What can I do with these processes? How can I streamline these processes? And sometimes when we can actually see that there's a problem, I'll give you an example of myself. I'm currently operational as an SME myself. I have fewer employees at this point, and it's very important for me to know my process. I know that for me to book a podcast with someone else, it's challenging. There's a process, and I need to streamline that process. I'm beginning to think about, what are my pain points, for example, and because of those pain points, I can actually decipher what kind of technology I think I might need. So, for example, Calendly is solving some of my calendar booking issues.
Yeah, mine too.
I have Zapier at the moment that's doing a bit of automation for me, just on my Gmail and some of my other personal emails. So, these are some of the digital tools, but you can't go to without knowing your process and knowing the kind of tools you need. And secondly, I think it's no problem. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. This is something I can't really underscore how important this is, because SMEs are trained to want to do everything by themselves. So they want to have one person that's multifaceted, they can do so many things. But the fact is, we need to really ask for help. And this help could be, working with a partner that really knows automation, that really understands the art of possible, that walks the walk, that talks the talk. And they can actually help, streamline this process, bring out the best of technologies, use the best practices. That's very important. Then I think lastly would be explore. Do your due diligence and explore. Do proof of concept. You can never go wrong with proof of concept. Do not commit to any technology without doing any proof of concept to see how feasible it is to do automation on. And that's one of I give this advice a couple of times to different people, because at the moment we have over 200 products on the market offering quite similar but very differentiating features. So it is, RPA at this point is a commodity. You can virtually get RPA as open source. You can virtually get RPA as closed source. You can get RPA as just script. So you need to do your due diligence and see, what will work for you. And sometimes that could boil down to the cost. For SMEs, good cash flow is very important. So you need to be very wary of, hidden cost that comes with some of these technologies. I had a client that at some point, 3 years down the line of using, for example, one of the big vendors, they came back and said, it's too expensive for us to keep up with the licenses. It's too expensive. We're not even utilizing this. What the ROI for this is just, I'm like, this is almost rubbish. We should have other alternative. And that almost killed the vision for automation within their enterprise. So it's very crucial for SMEs. I can never overemphasize all these points.
Well, Tolani, you're an absolute font of knowledge, and as you were issuing that warning, I heard the siren in the background, so good timing on that one. But yeah, I think, look, any company embarking on technology change has to start with business process. I mean, really, technology deployments in the enterprise are supporting business change, business process change, and it's not a simple task. But there's some very wise words from you there. I just want to say thank you for joining us on AI TV from sunny Dublin in Ireland, and look forward to chatting to you again sometime in the future. So thanks very much, Tolani, for being on AI TV today.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed myself.